your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us for a look back at Alberta this week. As the wildfires rage on in the province, an Alberta Bottle Collection Agency is collecting donations to help assist with relief efforts. Skip the Depot, which has a facility in Lethbridge, is partnering with the Canadian Red Cross and the Alberta Animal Rescue Crew Society to raise money to help fight the fires. James Trask, the CEO of Skip the Depot, explained what the money will go towards and how Albertans can help out.
We're encouraging Albertans to donate their bottles and cans to the Red Cross and to Alberta Animal Rescue. And they can do that by downloading the Skip the Depot app from the Google Play or Apple App Store. They can use the promo code 2023 Wildfire. And then all of their donations, all of their deposits from their bottles and cans will go directly to either the Red Cross or Alberta Animal Rescue, and they'll receive a 100% tax receipt.
According to Trask, Skip the Depot customers have donated close to $2 million to more than 1,700 Alberta charities, nonprofits, and schools. And the symptoms that come along with being in the midst of wildfire smoke can vary from person to person. This is according to Medical Officer of Health for Alberta Health Services South Zone, Dr. Vivian Satorp, who says that some people are more sensitive and others are simply more vulnerable.
For most individuals, like sitting by a smoky campfire, people can get irritated eyes, nose, throat. You end up producing more mucus. Your system produces more mucus to protect you from the irritants of the smoke and the particulate matter. Some individuals may sneeze, some may have coughing. Individuals with underlying lung conditions or heart conditions, lung conditions such as asthma or COPD, may end up having more coughing and may experience some symptoms of shortness of breath.
Now, the wildfire smoke took many of us by surprise this week. Environment Canada issued a special air quality statement with a 7 or a high risk rating. According to one Lethbridge pharmacist, the poor air quality also caused people from both Alberta and BC with respiratory issues to purchase a number of inhalers.
As soon as the smoke got in, we got increased demand of Ventolin, the rescue inhalers, among asthma and COPD patients. And just alone yesterday, like our usual go through for the Ventolin inhaler is like 5 to 6 a day. And yesterday, we went through over 20 inhalers.
And in other news, around 150 people came out to the NMAC Centre on Tuesday night to hear some of the Lethbridge provincial election candidates. The media and audience members had a chance to ask the candidates questions. A number of hot-button topics were discussed, including healthcare, education, and the economy. UCP Lethbridge East candidate Nathan Neudorf also talked about his government's plans for forcing violent offenders into drug rehabilitation.
We are going to support our police services by allowing them through the court system with a judge's order to direct those individuals to mandatory treatment. We're here to make sure that the safety of our community is first and foremost, and we're tired of being victims in our own communities. We want to make sure that we not only fund our police officers, but we support them with laws that allow the court system to do what the NDP didn't do the last time, creating chaos in the downtown, but by allowing those violent offenders to get the treatment they need, whether or not they always want to.
The Lethbridge West candidates also discussed a number of topics, including private education. The NDP candidate, Shannon Phillips, says if her party forms government on May 29th, they would continue to support private schools.
Charter schools receive about 70% of the per student operating grants that it's received from public schools, which is of course our public Catholic and Francophone schools. This has not changed. This was an approach that we inherited from the Progressive Conservative government before us. We did not change it. It has not changed since that time. So we've indicated that there will be no change going forward. And that's the answer to that question. We will fund enrollment growth wherever it occurs.
As for the discussion about candidates supporting a new permanent supervised consumption site for Lethbridge, many said they would not support it, including the UCP's Nathan Newdorf and Cheryl Seaborn. The NDP's Shannon Phillips said no to an SCS, and NDP Lethbridge East candidate Rob Miyashiro, after being asked the question a couple of times, said, quote, "At this point, no." The Alberta provincial election is coming up on May the 29th. After the break, no strike for WestJet pilots and the debate that took place between the two leading ladies of Alberta. We'll be right back. Welcome back. WestJet and Swoop Airlines pilots will not be striking after all. WestJet announced they've reached a tentative agreement with the Airline Pilots Association following 9 months of negotiations. The agreement was reached at 12:30 a.m. May 19th, just hours before the 72-hour strike deadline.
Our valued pilots are critical to our business, and we look forward to ensuring that our guests can safely get where they need to go with the service that they deserve. Thank you for your patience and loyalty during this time. This agreement is just one of many steps we are taking to re-establish WestJet as the friendly, reliable and affordable airline that you know and love.
As of Friday morning, both parties were awaiting the ratification vote to be put forward to its memberships. The union leaders believe this contract delivers on the goals of better job security, enhanced compensation, and more flexible schedules to allow for a better work-life balance, consistent with collective agreements other pilot groups are signing with their employers. According to Captain Bernard Lowell, chair of the WestJet ALPA Master Executive Council, this contract will help solve many of WestJet's pilots' attraction and retention issues. Meanwhile, planes were grounded in anticipation of a strike, meaning there are still hundreds of passengers stranded with canceled flights. Alex Light is one of them and is stranded in San Diego awaiting word about how to get home to Alberta.
I called WestJet customer service. I sat on hold for 3 hours, and in the process of sitting on hold with WestJet, while I was still on the phone, I got a notification in my email that said, "Your flight has been canceled." I had already beforehand, expecting the strike to happen, I had booked an extra night at my hostel just to be safe. And my hope is that I can be reimbursed for that. Through my cancellation email, I found a callback option, and I was able to use their online portal to fill it out and request a callback. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm hoping I can get some answers from WestJet about how the heck they're getting me home.
The airline says the full resumption of operations will take time, and they encourage passengers to continue checking the status of their flights before heading to the airport. According to a spokesperson at ALPA, stranded passengers should be receiving a message from the airline as soon as the schedulers figure things out. The union has asked the pilots to commit to picking up flights over the long weekend to get schedules back on time. In other news, the province of Alberta remains under a provincial state of emergency. As of Friday morning, 93 wildfires were burning in both central and the northern part of the province, and 25 of them were out of control. There were also 22 states of local emergency issued this week. Around 12,000 evacuees were still out of their homes in various communities. The mayor of a town in west central Alberta said it was emotional to return home nearly 2 weeks after an out-of-control wildfire forced residents to flee. Thousands, however, remain on edge as scores of fires continue to rage in many parts of the province.
The fire is still not out, but we can confirm that the danger and risk to the town of Drayton Valley and some of the area around Brazeau County outside the evacuation zone has lessened. There is an area of Brazeau County that is still under an evacuation order, and our fire crews are working diligently to continue the progress to allow those residents to return as soon as possible.
I don't think we'd be here if we didn't have that whole community support together, whether it's the military or firefighters, the municipal staff on both sides of this community here, both the town and the county, the service sector with all their tank trucks and equipment, the farmers out there disking up fields, creating fire breaks and things like that. So it's been a real concerted effort to get this to where we're standing here right now.
Alberta's two major party leaders went head-to-head in a debate Thursday night in Edmonton. It will be the only debate during the election between NDP leader Rachel Notley and UCP leader Danielle Smith. Most political analysts don't think there was a clear winner, though.
In this specific context, what Rachel Notley needed to do was try and paint Danielle Smith as sort of this inconsistent person who was going to put Alberta at risk, and Danielle Smith needed to look back at Rachel Notley's record and say, is this the sort of thing that Albertans want to do again? And you know, I don't know if either of them were wildly successful at that. The format was a bit strange, and they both had just sort of a series of mini speeches almost instead of a debate. And there was quite a lot of stuff that didn't actually get brought up over the course of the hour that they were on stage. So a bit of an odd debate, I would say. And, you know, given how tight the polls are, you really have to wonder if it actually moved the dial at all for either of them.
We need to take a quick break, but when we return, I'll be at the desk where producer Michael Clausen will join me after digging into UCP allegations of NDP's relationship with union bosses. Stay with us. The UCP also recently sent a letter to Elections Alberta calling for an investigation because they say the attack ads that they're seeing are allegedly being backed financially by the Alberta Teachers Association, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Alberta's division, or CUPE as it's known, and the Alberta Federation of Labour. And CUPE's communications director, by the way, is none other than NDP leader Rachel Notley's husband. So the UCP letter questions Notley and the NDP's relationship with provincial union bosses and their ongoing election activities. So we at BCN decided to dig into the matter a little further to see if there's actually any wrongdoing here at all, especially since finding ads that eventually link to pages that say powered by CUPE. Now, our producer Michael Clausen dug into the information about third-party advertisers listed on Elections Alberta website and also spoke with them. So I'm going to bring him in now. Michael Clausen, welcome to the desk here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You spoke with Elections Alberta. What did you find out? Is there any conflict of interest here?
Well, there were two things that piqued our curiosity. The first, of course, was all the talk about Mr. Lou Arab, who is Rachel Notley's husband and works in communications for CUPE.
Right. So is there a conflict of interest?
Well, I don't think so. It would seem to me from an email that I received courtesy of Mr. Arab's office that he's actually on a leave of absence until June the 6th.
Okay, so he's out of the game during the whole election race. So that alone would make him make it okay.
That kind of puts that one to rest for me if he's not in the office and working.
Okay, so what's the next part of this? What else did you find out?
So the other one was those two emails that I think most people would have seen or received, and they're talking about the advertising of unions as third-party advertisers during an election.
Right, the attack ads, basically.
We've all seen those. So with these such strong attack ads, we wanted to have a look at them. The fine print at the bottom of, let's say, the YouTube ads or other social media ads had fireucp.ca. Now, as you can see here on the screen now, as you scroll down to the bottom, it says powered by CUPE. So this caused me to remember kind of that further dust up that we saw with the UCP and Alberta Teachers Association, both of which we asked for them to come on camera and tell us their side of the story. And of course, both of them declined, which maybe is good because that way it helps the viewers to just investigate and find out for themselves. So we went to elections.ab.ca. And we discovered that trade unions it's perfectly fine for them to advertise as long as they're registered.
Okay, so yeah, I was just going to ask you, so the long and short answer of it is it's okay for unions to advertise.
That is the short answer, absolutely. So what we wanted to do is reach out to Robin Bell of Elections Alberta. She explained the expectations that Election Alberta places on third-party advertisers.
Third-party advertisers, when they register with Elections Alberta, they have to register as a specific kind of third-party advertiser, and that will depend on when their advertising is taking place. So right now, we're in the election period. So the advertisements we're seeing now are for election third-party advertisers. There's another category called political third-party advertisers, and those are for advertisements outside of the election period. And often, especially in a provincial election, those advertisers will want to advertise leading up to and during the election period. So they'll need to register as both. And there's different reporting requirements for each type. So a political third-party advertiser is required to report quarterly, whereas during an election period, those third-party advertisers need to report weekly.
So Jeanette, I wanted to show our viewers just how easy it is to see who's registered to advertise during a provincial election here in Alberta. First, go to elections.ab.ca, then click on Political Participants in the top bar, and then you'll see the third-party advertisers from this menu, and now you can see the listings of who's registered, and if you scroll down just a little bit more, you'll see who is no longer listed and has been delisted.
And that's where you were looking for ATA to see if they were actually registered as an advertiser, and you found that you couldn't find them, right?
Correct. I couldn't see Alberta Teachers Association in any other section other than delisted.
Okay, so I guess the question then is, does the UCP have a leg to stand on with this accusation? Is there going to be an investigation going forward?
I don't know. Perhaps there will be. I guess we will leave it up to Elections Alberta and the people of Alberta.
Okay, interesting. Michael, thank you so much for digging into this. We do need to take a quick break, but we will be right back with much more. Stay with us.
The lower the turnout, the better the odds for the NDP.
Welcome back. Earlier this week, Naveen Day sat down with Edmonton resident Vince Byfield to talk about the political landscape of Alberta's capital city. Could it go full Oilers colors? Well, Vince believes there's a potential for a combination of orange and blue in the city. Take a look.
You are in Edmonton, and traditionally Edmonton has voted NDP in the provincial election, yet Conservative in the federal elections. Why do you think there is such a difference between the provincial and federal election outcomes?
Well, there's a few reasons for that. First of all, it hasn't always voted NDP. It has lately voted NDP, especially in the last two elections, 2019 and 2015. But starting in around the mid-'80s, that was when they had their big breakthrough. So there's a few things that have to happen for the NDP to do well in Edmonton. A big one is low voter turnout. The lower the turnout, the better the odds for the NDP.
Wow.
That's number one. And I would argue that in the last election and the one prior to that, the NDP have successfully persuaded a lot of Conservatives in Edmonton that it doesn't really matter, their vote doesn't really matter, and they just don't even come to the polls. And so I think that's why we, right now, as you know, but maybe the average person watching doesn't know, 19 of the 20 Edmonton seats are NDP seats. So we comprise pretty much 3/4 of the NDP caucus coming out of Edmonton. There's only one UCP candidate, and that would be Casey Madhu, the deputy premier. But that hasn't always been the case. In fact, Edmonton traditionally was at least half Conservative, and prior to that, Social Credit. And I have a strong suspicion that we're making our way back there. It's just a question of whether enough Edmontonians show up to vote.
This campaign is getting very fiery as of late between Danielle Smith and Rachel Notley. What do you think the voter turnout would look like in Edmonton?
My suspicion is it's going to be high, and I strongly suspect we're going to have very tight races. In the lead up to this, just for the UCP all over the province, the candidate races, just to be the candidate for the UCP, we had at least 4 that were within 10 votes, and a couple of them were within 2 votes of winning. So and it wouldn't surprise me at all in Edmonton if we have some that come down to a handful of votes.
So from those who you've been talking to, do you feel that voters think that this election is a lock for their favorite party or candidate?
Not at all. No. Even 338 is now adjusting a number of the seats for Edmonton from sure bets for the NDP to likely for the NDP. And just going around Edmonton looking at signage, I'm seeing a lot more UCP signage than in the past. But signage, can be misleading. When you're talking the major arteries, basically it's whoever can afford the most signs for that. What's much more telling is how many signs you see on people's lawns, because each one of those represents the permission of the tenant or owner of that property. And there, I wouldn't say that it's the NDP are still very, very predominant, no question. But the UCPs, I'm in McClung on the west side of Edmonton, and I'd say it's about 50-50 right now. So, and I think that's in large part the case. Just going from door to door, when you're talking on behalf of the UCP, we typically see 39%, say 30 at over a third that are leaning for us, and then maybe a quarter that are leaning for the NDP. But we identify ourselves as UCP, so therefore it's very unlikely that there's going to be some NDP who just don't want to share their views with a UCP person. So it's going to be tight. I'm pretty sure it's going to be tight, except for some of the central constituencies. Like I really don't see Rachel having a challenge in Strathcona, and City Centre. Likewise, those are probably going to still be strong NDP wins, but it's the ones around the Henday, both in and out, that are up for grabs.
Up next, the election in the swing vote city of Calgary. Did the needle move in favor of the NDP or the UCP? Well, that's next. Keep it right here. Remember the sound of music and the question of how do you solve a problem like Maria? Well, it might seem that in this election, Calgary is the problem to solve. Dave Naylor, news editor of the Western Standard, chatted with me about the issues facing the NDP and the UCP in the undecided city of Calgary. Take a look. Let's start with the findings of the Ethics Commissioner, which was announced Thursday. So this report says that both the CBC and the NDP lied to the public about Danielle Smith speaking with the Crown and interfering in certain cases to do with COVID restrictions, like the Arthur Pulowski case, for example. So, Dave, do you think this could swing the needle of public opinion at all towards the UCP?
Well, it's sort of a case of good news, bad news. The bad news is the Ethics Commissioner found the Premier had violated the Conflict of Interest Act by talking to her Justice Minister about COVID court cases. But she was cleared of allegations that CBC and the NDP made about a month or so ago that she had personally done it or people in her office had done it. So for the UCP, that's a big win. Premier today demanded the CBC retract the story and apologize, or she may continue her threatened legal action. And she sort of threw up her hands at the finding that she contravened the Conflict of Interest Act by saying, well, I was asking my Justice Minister for a justice opinion, and she's sort of saying, what else can a Premier do? And then she invited the justice, or she invited the Ethics Commissioner to give her some advice the next time on who she should talk to.
And it's also interesting to note that this was an internal investigation as well. So, Dave, do you think that there's much weight in these findings, or should they have maybe hired an outside third-party investigator?
Well, the Ethics Commissioner is independent. She reports only to the Assembly. She has reserved the right to put punishments forth when the Assembly reconvenes after the election, but it appears to me to be a minor infraction that is not going to cause too much trouble.
Calgary is kind of that swing area, so that's where you are now. So let's talk about that. So what are you hearing from Calgary voters with just 1 week left in this race?
Well, you know what? It's interesting to see the NDP leader Rachel Notley. I don't think she's had a campaign event in Edmonton. She's just focused on Calgary. The NDP headquarters is focused, based in Calgary. Premier Smith is, she's kind of in a tough position at the moment with the emergency state of alert with the forest fires. Mm-hmm. So she spends her morning dealing with that disaster and then spends the afternoon dealing with campaigning. I think the general sense in Calgary is that the NDP just doesn't have enough support in the city to get the sweep that they need. They're going to have to flip some ridings and some that they won't. We had a poll out earlier this week saying they will flip Calgary Elbow and get that sort of downtown area riding. But again, it seems to me that the NDP is just slowly fading a little bit.
With that said, what kind of a critique would you give either of Notley or Smith in this?
Well, the NDP is not so much campaigning on their platform; they're just campaigning on what a horrible person Danielle Smith is. They're not putting out too many new ideas. They have costed their election plans. They're going to 2.1 in the healthcare system, but they say their year in power, their first year they'll have more than a $3 billion surplus. The UCP hasn't costed their election campaign, but they've been more detailed in terms of platforms, tax cuts, where the NDP has promised that they will increase business taxes.
The big carrot for voters in Calgary is that Promise Entertainment Complex and hockey rink. And Dave, you're right there in Calgary. So what's your take on this new Promise project?
We are a city that rejected a couple of years ago a bid to go for the Olympics again because the finances weren't there, and Calgarians weren't willing to risk the future of the city on some sketchy Olympic details. So I kind of think this may fall into the same issue. That they don't want their $1.2 billion to go to billionaires who own hockey teams.
Stay with us after the break for some strangely colored carrots and meals that are easy to prepare and sure to satisfy. We'll be right back with a Southern Alberta chef. Keep it right here.